Good evening, classmates. This is posting for Modular 4. I really enjoyed this week's reading, and I will be talking about Chapter 11 in the textbook. For this modular, I have to admit, I have never heard about the BLT model, so I found this section very interesting. I think we all know that universities have been going down the path of more administrators and less full-time faculty. You can definitely see that here at UNCW over the last couple of years. I have to agree that higher education is in crisis. If you look back over the last 10 years, the huge cutbacks that universities have been taken due to lack of funding from the state and federal government has ultimately caused tuition to skyrocket out of control, which affects all students who are obtaining a college degree, either here at UNCW or across America. When we talk about the necessity that universities need to expand or invest more in technology, we need to remember that this comes with a cost. This week I was in a meeting. To change a standard classroom to a WebEx room costs around $50,000. In addition, in 4 to 6 years, it's going to cost $6,000 just to upgrade the equipment due to being classified as obsolete as technology change. So I do believe that technology is essential in keeping up with this global world and making sure that our young adults have that are graduating have the opportunity to learn the most updated technology, which ultimately will make them more marketable and help grow the economy. But we need to be aware of the cost and how the cost will eventually filter down to students, which is higher tuition, once again, unless the federal government or the state start investing more in higher education. My second point of this chapter, which I found interesting, which I would like to know what the data is we spend a lot of time on institutional research. And what I mean by that is we collect all this data on faculty performance, student performance, learning objectives, and all sorts of things. But what are we really doing with this great information that we collect? For example, in the book there was a course 100 that was offered at a college, and they found out, in fact, that it did not contribute to students having a better retention rate, and so they didn't do anything with the data. They kept the course there, which ultimately it affects the students because this is a course which credit hours are based on tuition, or tuition is based on credit hours. Let's say that better. So students are required to take courses that are really not that effective by the data that we collected through our institutional research. So I found that really interesting that we can spend all this time and money on collecting data or hiring administrators to perform all this data and collect it. But if we don't make any changes or use the data to benefit not just the university but students, I just don't see why it's really that important to be collecting data unless you're out there to make positive change, which would affect everybody, not just having numbers to say, hey, this is what our numbers show. So with that said, I found it really interesting. I would like to know in the future if they'll ever show some data on some courses that are offered at UNCW, especially we have a Uni 101 class. What is the positive or negative data show on that class or any other classes that are offered at UNCW, and will it ever be reviewed and maybe taken as not as a requirement? Would also reduce the number of credit hours a student would need to take to graduate, or reduce their tuition. So that'll be interesting to see. But I am for technology, and I believe it's important in higher education. But we also have to remember that there's a cost to it, and we need to see how we're going to invest into higher education. That is my posting, and thank you. Have a good evening.